I am joined by Aaron Gertler, aka Little Beep, winner of MTG DreamHack, second place at the MTG Grand Finals in 2020, and you probably know him if you know Magic as the Teamer Adventures guy. So, Aaron, you're about to guess how good Marvel Snap cards are. I believe you said you have played about 30 games of Marvel Snap, so I don't need to go through the basics like, 12 card decks, all that kind of stuff, or would you like me to go through that?
Could you remind me what the blue and the orange? I'm assuming the blue is cost and the orange is power.
Okay, yes. All right.
Okay.
Yes, the blue is cost and the orange is
This card looks like it'd
power.
be really bad if blue were power and orange was cost.
It would be really bad if it was reversed. Yes. That's not a hint, by the way. All right. So yes, blue is cost, orange is power. There are 4 slots on the board in any given situation. There are 3 locations. Each of them has 4 slots. You win by getting the most points at 2 out of the 3 locations. You can press the snap button to double the stakes, which once you start doing, you'll be like, why isn't this in every game ever? I can't tell you how many times I've tried to snap in other games. It kind of drives me nuts at this point. And then I think that's basically all you need to know, since you do know hand size stuff, you do know deck size stuff. That stuff is stuff you already know.
The mana system, yeah, all that. I think if I have more questions, I'll let you know.
All right. So we're gonna start with Yellow Jacket. 0 cost, 2 power, but on reveal, afflict your other cards at this location with -1 power.
And so on reveal basically means it only happens when it's turned up. Like if you play this first and you play other stuff later, no affliction. Is that true?
That's correct.
Okay. So that in that case, this card seems, so it's free. That's the first thing that stands out. 0 cost. It's really low. In Magic, pretty much anything that's free has made its way into a constructed deck at some point or another. It's almost impossible to make a free spell so bad no one will play it. You can make a free spell that literally did nothing and it would still probably see play in some decks, because there's just so much value in doing stuff. Now Snap has this harsh limit that Magic doesn't, where you can only have 12 cards in play at a time. And some of them might be rocks or squirrels or something, if I remember correctly. And so maybe there's some downside to playing a card that's very low impact, but it's free, so I feel like it's got to be good. Tell me it's good.
Okay, it's not very good. No. This is
all right. You knew I was going to walk into this trap, didn't you?
Not really, actually. I didn't think about it. I didn't do these in a specific order, since when I set the deck up, it's sort of them in mana order. I'm going to be picking them kind of randomly throughout that. That said, Yellow Jacket, it's very much not a good card. It has seen some play in the context of a deck that has what you would know in Magic as a storm payoff, like a card that gets power for the other cards you play. There are a lot of cards in Magic that are there's storm payoffs, and then there's Quirion Dryad type cards. And in a deck that runs all of those, this can be an option. But typically it has been at best a fringe choice rather than something that is actually legitimately influencing the meta. I think most people, if they get Yellow Jacket, they're pretty upset to see it. If you open this on the
it's like the Bone Saw or the Mem Knight. It's a free spell, but it's not one of the good ones.
It is 2023 Mem Knight, where maybe 10 years ago in Magic you could have tried to cope into that. But yeah, it's like that. It's this is free, but also the specifics of when you can get value out of this are so specific that you tend to not want to use up one of the cards in your hand on something that does this.
So in Magic, they say if it's free, it's me. In this case, it's free, it's a B, but it's not me.
We're jumping into the deep end here. This is Mr. Negative. Now, you understand the turn limit in Marvel Snap. There are only 6 turns in the game. This is a card you can play on turn 4, and he has -1 power, but he swaps the power and cost of all the cards in your deck.
In your deck. And that's the ones that are left in your deck, or all the ones that are in your hand?
The ones that are left in your deck.
Okay. Interesting. So, first question would be, are there going to be cards that have very low power and very high cost? I'm sure there are. I'm sure many of them also have busted abilities to make up for the fact that they have high cost and low power. So if you can switch those around to be diverse, that sounds powerful. The next question is...
You are currently describing Iron Man, a card you may be familiar with having played the intro.
Yeah. Those, remember stuff along those lines. So those cards are obviously great with this if you can arrange to draw this before you draw those cards. So the remaining questions would be A is, can you arrange to draw this reliably enough in a 12-card deck? possibly, and maybe there's like tutor effects that I'm not aware of that could let you pretty much play this. If you can play this turn 4 every game and you have a deck built around it, that sounds like it would allow for a really powerful swing. And so even if I was burned the first time, I kind of have a good feeling about Mr. Negative. It's just such a weird, unique effect that feels like one of those things that might have been broken when it came out, just because it feels like one of those things that they wouldn't. It feels very hard to balance this effect without like doing some deliberate work on seeing how people play it. So maybe that's too meta, but I think it's good.
I was going to do a victory lap on this one because Mr. Negative is like the classic like tier 4 combo deck that exists in like every game, where it's just like, this is not a good deck. It has never won a tournament, but people love playing it, right? So, but here's where I'm going to give you points on. You are absolutely correct that when this card released, it was broken. When it released, it was a 4/4. They have nerfed it multiple times. They nerfed it down to a 4/1, and then they nerfed it down to a 4-1. You are absolutely correct that in that previous form, it was arguably the best card that they've ever made. Like, this is one of the best things that they'd ever made when it wasn't absolutely killing you. Now, of course, it is kind of absolutely killing you when you play this card, so it is a true combo deck. Mr. Negative is a card that is, you are correct about the role. I think I would compare it to, do you remember like the Panharmonicon decks?
Panharmonicon is one of my favorite decks of all time.
Yes. It's like that, but worse. That's what I would say. He is the Panharmonicon, but like significantly worse because of the time limit, right? Panharmonicon, there's no time limit. You just need to not die. This, there's a time limit. You need to win the game in 6 turns, and so it's a little bit more difficult.
I think the thing that really tricks me here is just like not even thinking about the power on the card. I'm like, oh, that's cute. Normally in Magic, if you have an effect that's very powerful, it doesn't so much matter how good the body is that it's attached to. And in this case, of course, Marvel Snap, again, you only get 12 cards in play. You want them all to be working for you. And I think even thinking that the difference of like 5 power one way or another when you have an effect that's powerful, I wouldn't normally think of that as being like super meaningful. But it's interesting that it is.
Okay, we're learning. He's learning maybe too fast. Can you slow down? I have several of these to get through, and I'd really like to trick you again, okay?
Well, I want to get one right, so we'll see.
Next up is Black Widow. On reveal, she adds a Widow's Bite to your opponent's hand. Widow's Bite is this thing. It's free, -1 power, and if they have it in their hand, they can't draw cards. So she immediately gets rid of a draw in the game.
Okay, so And Marvel Snap, you basically, I mean, I guess sometimes you might be able to draw other cards in your deck because cards do different things, but by default, it seems like by default, you don't draw your whole deck, right? Like if you don't play any additional draw effects.
Yeah, you draw 9 out of your 12 usually.
Okay, so if you don't have some way to get rid of this, it's basically you lose 1/9 of all the stuff you were going to have. That seems like a lot. Like I'm playing this card, which is one of the, I guess, 12 things I can have on the board. My opponent loses something. It's possible that like, you know, if your opponent's deck really relies on drawing a particular card, you make them less likely to have that by a fair margin. They're also getting -1 power on their board because they have to play this. If you play this on turn 2, obviously they have to play the Widow's Bite somewhere.
Correct.
So they're losing access to one of their 12 cards, one of the 9 cards they were going to draw in the game by default, and one of their 12 slots, and they're taking a negative hit for it. And in exchange, I have to play kind of an expensive 1 power thing.
Yes,
one of these has to be good, and the more I think about this, the more this looks. It seems really strong fractionally. I'm trying to think, is there any reason it wouldn't be? But I also don't want to be super investigating. Right, so I'm going to say, based on that analysis, I'm not going to overthink it. I'm going to say this one seems good. This one's got to be good, right?
Yes,
Please?
Yes. This one is a good card. She wasn't for a very long time, but right now, I would say right now is the best she's ever been. Like, they added that -1 power to the Widow's Bite, and it made her legitimately very powerful. There's a lot of, but also I think right now, based on like some specific format context, which I don't think discussing with you is going to like spoil anything in the future, there's a lot going on with like repeatable on reveals right now that are very good for a low cost. And so like this card, you send it back to your hand, you play it again. You're also getting power on other units by doing that because other units have recently been released that do that. So I'm not saying she was always a great card. I think for the most of her life, she's been bad. But right now, in this current metagame, she's the best she's ever been. Like, she is a real legitimate archetype player in what I would say is probably the strongest baseline shell in the game. Not always in there because there are other things that you prefer over her sometimes, but the bounce shell does like her a whole lot. And I
wasn't even thinking of this as like an enter the battlefield effect. If I think of it that way, that even adds more nuance to like what could make it good. So yeah, all right. I'm clearly a genius. I've learned everything there is to know. You won't fool me again.
I will not fool you again. Despite the fact that is my whole goal every time I make one of these videos. All right, Hell Cow. 4/8. On reveal, discard 2 cards from your hand.
Hell Cow. All right. Well, so the really, really baseline, like, person who plays card games opinion of this is that discarding 2 cards seems bad. The next level of this is, can you arrange it so you're revealing this on the last card, the last play of the game, so that it doesn't matter that you've discarded the cards? Another thought is, like, are there opposing cards that can pressure your hand, which make it much harder to use this? I guess if you play as the last card, you never have to discard anyway, so that's how that works, right? Like, if you try to discard from empty hand, nothing happens?
Correct.
Okay.
I should also let you know, there are cards that synergize with discarding. Like, just like any other, it is one of those things. There are cards that do that.
Okay, 4 mana, 8 power is like a really good ratio, and as we discussed with Mr. Negative, power actually, does matter. It's not like Magic, a game where kind of big idiots, as cards go, have sort of become outclassed in most formats. Like, this is a big idiot, but it seems like Marvel Snap might be a big idiot's good sometimes kind of game, from what I've heard so far. Now, the question is this like the best? As far as like, if there are cards that synergize with discard, and those cards are good, this card seems like it's hard to imagine a card getting much better than this as like a discard effect in a game like Snap. Maybe that's foolish. Maybe there's like some one cost thing, but like, it seems like it does a very good job of giving you power on both ends if you want to be discarding. On the other hand, there's the second question of like, are the discard decks actually good? Just because there are cards that synergize with this doesn't mean they're good. It could be the I don't know, Homerid tribal of Snap, or you don't want to play any of these cards, so it doesn't matter that they buff each other. I'm a little suspicious of Hell Cow. There's a thing about the big numbers and I feel like I'm going to guess there are better things you could be doing. I'm going to be skeptical of this. I think it's not great. It might be one of those cards people play for fun. I'm going to guess it's not like a tournament champion.
Dude, he's on to me. You're so on to me right now. Yes, I put this in there with the specific goal of having you think like, okay, if there's discard synergy in this deck, in this game, this guy is good. And for the record, discard synergy is good in this game. It's just Hell Cow is not good in the deck. Not because there are necessarily better options, but because you need to be discarding specific things, such that random discard is very, very tough for you to deal with.
I didn't even realize it was random. I should have asked that question.
It is random.
In Magic, if you said this, you get to pick.
Dude, so I feel like you need to like take an L on this one, because if you thought you could, if this card could pick, it'd be busted.
Okay. So I guess in Magic, it's discard versus discard at random. I assume Snap is discard versus choose and discard.
No, there's no chooses. You can't choose anything in Snap. There's no pick anything.
That does make it faster, I guess. There's no like
yes. There's no like I'm sitting here looking at a Discover in Hearthstone for a minute and a half. You cannot do that. No.
All right. If I could get a partial
no, we'll give you credit for that.
Negative, I'll take a partial L here.
You got it right. You absolutely got it right. You 100% got it right.
Yeah. If I knew it was random, I would still have been skeptical. If I thought it was choose, but if you had told me it was random, that would make it a much worse Balduvian Hordes or something.
Jesus Christ! What year is that card from?
30,000 Magic cards.
What year is that card from?
94? 95?
That card is almost as old as me, and you're just dropping that reference like the Zoomers who watch my fucking channel.
Hey, if there's like a couple of old Magic heads who switch to Snap, this is for you 30-year-old or older people.
Next up, Professor X.
Professor X, okay.
5/3. So I'll go through what his effect actually means, right? 5/3, lock down this location ongoing. So what that means is you play him if you're winning the location. When he reveals, you basically are going to win it. Like, there's some things that can put power into the location next to them, stuff like that. But generally speaking, what this guy is doing is saying, I am playing this incredibly subpar body to guarantee a 1 lane, and that tends to be how he's played. And to be clear, yes, his body is subpar, which is weird because, like, look at him, right? He's kind of jacked. But that is the general principle of this card. And I have heard this card described as the most Magic player Marvel Snap card. So I'm interested to see where you go with it. Because there are things, like, I will be clear, there are things that can put power into his lane. For the most part, his role is just spending a lot of, like, you're paying a real tempo cost in order to lock down a lane. That's the idea.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, you've got some of my chatter out of the way. That's what I was thinking when I saw it. It's like, okay, you win a third of the game. In Magic, there's not really it's interesting this is a Magic player card, because there's not like a good Magic equivalent for this. There's the closest thing I can think of to, like, yeah, you won a third of the game is like milling a third of your opponent's deck, which is a classic way to lose the whole game.
No, it's
So part of me wonders, is Professor X analogous to this, where it's like, yeah, you won the battle, but it's very hard to win a battle that way without losing the war, because that's your whole turn 5. It's your second best turn in the game. You're winning a location, but it's one of those cards that's like interesting for your opponent to, like, there's also the disaster where if your opponent plays around it, if they play something really good the same turn you play a Professor X, and it's like not hard to predict Professor X because it's a 5 cost. There are only so many turns you could bring it out on. If your opponent anticipates you play something better for the same cost at the same location, then they've like won the location and you can't win it back. And so they got one over on you. So you both have to deal with the tempo cost of playing Professor X and the like possibility that your opponent just like outfoxes you and like makes the right guess and wins. And it feels like in Marvel Snap, obviously there's a guessing element to every game here. But it feels like Professor X is playing a very dangerous game in a way that would be hard to sustain against good players. So I am going to say I am not a Professor X believer.
okay. He's actually quite good. I think your analysis is basically correct, but there's like a couple of contextual things that you're missing, because you're analyzing it in a sort of vacuum. Based on what I could tell, you're analyzing it in the context of, you know, both players are playing like a card on 1, a card on 2, a card on 3, a card on 4, a card on 5. It's stuff like that, right? And that's not really how it tends to go. Like in those early situations, yes, Professor X can be quite poor. Like in those early game type decks, right? Like they tend to be all about just putting the most stats that you can get, like the early collection level decks. But as you get further on, there are a couple of things that really change that. The first is that you can cheat him out on turn 4 by like getting a card that generates energy on the board. You get him out on turn 4. He's much more unfair on turn 4. The second is that if you run those cards that put power into the lanes next to them, and there are several of them, you can Professor X kind of freely, because you run those cards and you can reasonably look at your opponent and be like, all right, I know what deck they're playing. They don't have the stuff to beat this. You can just jam the guy down and you'll end up winning anyway. So he's a core lockdown card. And the reason I think people refer to him as the most Magic player card, he is the closest thing this game has to like Counterspell, where it's just like, no, you have nothing. You do not get to do whatever it is you wanted to do this game. You do not get to do that. And he also forms a bit of a 1-2 punch with a couple of other cards that you lock down a location and then you win another location. And it's just very, very difficult to deal with.
So that's something, yeah, I should have thought about that. Like maybe you have one Professor X and then one other effect that's so strong you can almost always power through in one of the other 2 locations, such that you almost have more of a guaranteed kill in that case. And then
that's pretty much his thing, yeah.
Cheating him out makes a lot of sense. And then one thing I haven't thought about at all is like, what do the different locations do? Because my understanding is it's always random, right? There's like a lot to choose from.
Correct. Like so, the way locations work in Marvel Snap, I will go through this. I assumed you were aware of it, but just in case. The way locations work, there's a pool of about 130 or so, I think, and they're weighted. The common ones, the ones that have less of an impact on the game, are more common, obviously. Like 70% of any location that you're going to see is going to be a common location. And then they get rarer and rarer and more impactful until you get to ones that like play the entire game for you and you don't actually have any control over the game anymore, or ones that blow up every other location. They get rarer and weirder at the top end, but those are like 1 in 500. For the most part, the common locations are not overly impactful, but they can take advantage of things like that.
And that's the thing is, like, if there's a location you're disadvantaged at, maybe you can use Professor X to secure that in a way that, you know, gives you a chance where you otherwise wouldn't have had one. Or maybe there's a location where you're incredibly advantaged and you just need to Professor X one of the other 2 and then win in the one where you're incredibly advantaged. So the fact that there's like some variance and that you can use them to shore up weaknesses, I guess could also make him stronger. All right.
That's a good analysis, because there's locations, for example, Death's Domain is a location where any card played on it dies. When you play Professor X there, he stays alive. He locks down that location. So that's an example of
he
one
can't
of
be
those.
removed himself.
Correct. So like that's an example of one of those locations where it's just like, oh, this guy actually helps me on various locations as well. He can also be used
you
as like
guarantee a win in that location.
yes,
that's incredible.
Yes, I mean, not guarantee, but for the most part, right? Like if they don't have anything, they can go there as well, right?
Yeah.
But like, yeah, that is generally there are like some games at the top end where you'll play Professor X into a location like that, and your opponent will be like, I knew you were going to do that, and having also played a card there, because if your guy reveals first, the effect takes effect. Their card will stay alive too. There's a whole lot that goes into this guy. He's a complex card, but he is very powerful. Uatu the Watcher. 1/2, so on rate. At the start of the game, you get to see what the right location is. That's the one that's revealed on turn 3. You just get to know that, and that is what Uatu does.
Okay, it's good that we just talked about locations. So, you get to learn some information. You get to learn it 2 turns in advance, right?
Yeah, he happens regardless of whether or not he's just like if he's just in your deck, you get this.
Oh, if he's just in your deck, you get that. Okay, so he's like a companion. Already,
yes,
I'm maybe going down the wrong. Maybe this is taking down the wrong track. I don't think
anything's like a companion. I don't think there's any I don't think any card in Marvel Snap has ever been good enough to be compared to that. I think. No,
well, I mean, it could be like a bad companion. Not all the companions were good, but yeah, that's I mean, or maybe like what's the commander thing where you have him in your command zone, you just get
it's like Eminence. It's a little more like Eminence. Yeah,
man, you're more of a Magic player than I am. All right, now the effect is good. The question is, in order to get the effect, you have to play like a 1/2 that doesn't have any other synergies. So part of me is thinking, okay, what are all the other 1-cost cards? How good an effect is this giving you compared to what you could get for other 1-costs? Like, are there like broken 1-costs that are like essential decks such that this is getting away? Although, you can play this and a bunch of other 1-costs. There's no reason you can't. We talked about locations, maybe the common locations being more frequent and not being as game-breaking. And if, the less impactful location's effect is, the less it matters that you know what it is, in theory. And it doesn't sound like there are all that many, like, obviously, like, something like Death's Domain is incredibly good to know about in advance. But I'm guessing that the locations that do stuff like destroy all your cards there are, like, pretty rare. And, you're not often going to, like, take a huge, massive beating from playing at a location before you knew what it was. But I think it's a free effect. There's just not that much. This is one of those things, again, where the Marvel Snap is a small game. It's quick. There are not many turns. Not many cards are played. There's not much information. And so anything that, like, gives you something extra, it just feels more impactful on the basis of that. Like, I don't know. In Magic, like, knowing what's in your opponent's hand is fine, but not that exciting. Like, by itself, it's, not going to elevate a mediocre card to good if it had that extra bonus to it. Like, it's every game. I think this one's I'm going to say decent. Maybe not like mandatory to play, maybe not broken, but I'm going to say it seems goodish.
This is like the worst card in the game.
The worst card in the game.
Booty. He's not the literal worst card in the game, but last time I checked the stats on him, his win rate of just including him in a deck, if you put this guy in your deck, it's like 40%. So he is on rate. It's just that 1/2s are just not a thing you're ever interested in doing. Because of the way Marvel Snap works, I think BBD actually covered this in the previous video. It's a little bit like draft, where like you play your 1/2, but like they play a 3/4, and they used less cards to get more power, or the same amount of cards to get more power. Where it's like the cost of something like Uatu is playing a 1/2 and putting it in your deck. So it's a cost of that 1/12 of your deck is just a guy who sucks, right? No one actually plays a 1/2.
Kind of reversing it on me, right? It's a small game. You're going to draw most of your cards. One of them's this guy. I think part of it's that the starter deck might have actually fooled me there, because I think when you're playing starter, a 1/2 is like, it seems like on rate. This is like the 1-costs are not much better than this.
1-costs aren't much better than this even at endgame. Like, this is still on rate for a 1-cost, but you need your 1-cost to be like stupid broken if you want to be investing in a 1-cost. Like, there are cards that are like Ant-Man, for example, is like a 1/4 when he's on, and that's not even a card that sees a lot of play. There's another issue with 1-costs, though, I will say. There's a card that exists called Killmonger. It kills every 1-cost on the board. So it's very hard to even begin to invest in this, but I will say Killmonger's not the reason why Uatu isn't good.
Just like it's just not enough card to be a card. That's interesting that one costs are actually not popular, or at least not.
They're not.
Wow. This is like very funny for a game where you get 21 mana and on one turn you're guaranteed to only have 1 mana. The idea of like a competitive Magic deck not playing 1-cost cards is bizarre unless it had like a very specific reason to do that.
Right. Okay. Like they're around. Decks will play 1-cost cards, but they need to be doing a specific thing. And usually the decks that play 1-cost cards right now, at least, are they're either going to be a 1-cost card that scales insanely, right? A 1-cost card that will get a lot bigger than other 1-cost cards. A 1-cost card that synergizes with their game plan, or a deck built around recycling those 1-cost cards by sending them back to your hand. None of those are Uatu, right? That's just not what any of them... At best, you could put them in category 2. But none of those are Uatu, right? They're going to be 1-cost that can scale bigger. He's not a card you can reuse. The information is free, but you're giving up 1/12 of your deck, and, of course, a board slot for a 1/2.
And the information just doesn't seem that valuable most of the time, so I was like...
Correct.
On the right track there, just not really thinking about... Yeah, like cost of, like in Magic, a little tiny trinkety effect, which we might call like a cantrip in some cases, or, you know, if it's free, it's cheap, it's like low cost to include it, so if you get anything useful out of it, you're usually pretty happy. But this is good to remember. Marble Stab is a small game. Your cards all have to, like, do stuff.
If this guy said draw a card on him, like, if this guy was actually cantripping, he'd be one of the best cards in the game, right? Like, if you could staple, like, draw a card onto any card in Marvel Snap, it instantly becomes top 5. Like, it is very hard for draw a card to be bad text in Marvel Snap. They're very, because again, 12-card decks, they're very, very stingy with that. So they do try to put, like, cantrips in like this, where it's like, let me tag this on. Would you believe they actually thought this card was too broken when they originally made it? They had him at a 1/1. They were like, we need to make sure he's not too broken. So I don't think you're off base looking at it. I just think that, like, there's a sort of, it's hard to make a 1-cost card that you can't reuse the effect, that doesn't scale.
It doesn't synergize. It's like, you have 12 cards in your deck, they all have to be, like, pursuing a plan.
Yeah.
Or interfering with your opponent's plan in some way, I guess, like a Black Widow type card. And if you're not doing either of those things, maybe I can see how it's a waste of space. Okay, we're learning. You've fooled me a couple times. I hope you're happy.
I'll be extremely happy. This is Yandu. 1/2. Destroy the top card of your opponent's deck. Now, again, 12 cards, but also, you are a Magic player. You understand what is and is not disruption. So you know whether or not that's actually getting things.
Milling only counts if you're, if it's achieving something. And I guess my first question is, what happens if your deck runs out of cards before the game's over?
Literally nothing. You just cannot draw cards. There's no fatigue. You don't instantly lose the game. You just get rid of the card.
And I can't imagine there are that many other cards that do this, because if you could play all of them and just destroy your opponent's whole deck so they couldn't draw cards, that feels like it would be like kind of like a toxic game mechanic, even if it wouldn't necessarily be good because you'd be wasting slots. I feel like it's not a space they'd want to like play in too much.
I think there's
this is like going too meta.
I want to say there's like 3 cards that can do something like this. Maybe it's 2. I think it's 2. It might just be this guy and one other guy, just off the top of my head. It's not something they play around with too much, but this guy is a guy that has seen play.
Okay. Well, you're already telling me something. You're already giving away some info there.
I don't think I am. I'm going to be honest with you.
Okay, it's seen play, so I don't know how much play. Could be bad but seen play, or good but seen play. So we talked about the Watcher being a 1/2 and that not being very good if it doesn't synergize or anything like that. And it doesn't sound like Yandu necessarily has that much in the way of synergy. It's clearly meant to be disruptive. You're not like milling your opponent's whole deck to lock them out. So at least it doesn't sound like that's a big strategy, although maybe you play those 3 cards. I don't know. Let's put that aside. How good is it to mill one of your opponent's cards? When it's destroyed, is there some kind of graveyard? Like, does your opponent have some way to, like,
there's not
access
a
the card?
graveyard. There's no way for them to access the card, but there are cards that key off of, like, the amount of cards destroyed. There are cards that scale with, like, destroyed cards' power, things like that.
But there's no, like, regrowing, like, if it's gone, it's gone.
Yeah, there's no reanimator in this game. Reanimator in this game, that space is filled by some discard stuff, actually.
Okay. So, we're getting one of our opponent's cards. I'm guessing there are decks, given there are only 12 cards in a deck.
Okay, hold on. Chad is reminding me that there is one reanimator card. There is one reanimator card.
Okay.
But
the
it's
fact
not
that you
like...
didn't know what it was makes me think, it's not an important... You're the best Marvel Snap player in the world or something. Okay.
Oh man.
All right. So Yandu, we're destroying one of our opponent's cards. They only get 12. I'm guessing there are decks that like probably need to have like one of a couple cards to actually like win the game. But I'd be surprised
Correct.
if there were like a ton of popular decks where you could only win the game by drawing a single card, because you don't draw your whole deck every game. It's hard to draw extra cards. There are cards like Black Widow that make it even harder. It feels like only having like one win condition per se would leave you like too vulnerable to various types of disruption. I would guess that's not like a super popular approach. That said, it's like I feel like Snap decks from the starter game I was playing, which very, very different than the pro scene, I'm sure. It felt like a lot of that stuff like little mini combos. Like you'd want to get like a pair of cards together, and that would be nice. Or one of your cards wouldn't be that good, but if you had like one of two other cards, it would be better. But then like if you destroy the top of your opponent's deck, they just have a better chance of drawing one of those other cards. Maybe it's like you're making it easier for them to get certain things, even if you take away one of the other things they could have. And so there's another question of like, how reliably can you like tutor the things you want? If I destroy something, am I getting rid of something you almost certainly could have had otherwise, or is it always just a crapshoot?
It's the top card. There's there's not like real tutors in Marvel Snap. There's a couple cards that you only draw on specific turns, but there's not like a way to, we talked about this with Mr. Negative, you can't make him show up in your hand.
Yeah, there's a part of me that thinks that by following the Watcher with this, you're trying to trick me. You're showing me 1/2s that don't have like incredible effects, or that have effects that seem innocuous, and Yandu's actually going to turn out to be stupid broken. But you know what? I'm going to stick to my guns. I'm going to say Yandu does not seem stupid broken. He's seen play. I'm going to guess he's not incredible, but if he is incredible, I look forward to finding out why.
Okay, so Yandu, you're exactly on it here. This is why I didn't think he's seen play is like actually a hint, because it's just one of those cards that a lot of people are very wrong about in Marvel Snap. They think it is actual disruption. It's not. Where Yandu is good is in a deck that wants to have a certain amount of things destroyed per game in order to get further payoff. That's the thing that he's actually seeing play in. So you're not like bouncing this guy and blowing stuff up. You're correct. He's not a really good disruptive option. But the fact that he destroys the top card for free can give you an extra, I guess you'd say, proc of destroy. And there are cards that are destroy matters cards that count those procs. And so that is what Yandu does. He is exactly a role player.
Okay, that makes sense. It's one of those things that's a little different from Magic, like milling your opponent. There are certain cards that synergize with that. None of them are very good. But if you think of like destroying as this thing you do to anything in any zone, that is analogous to a lot of stuff in Magic. And and just like it's nice to see that some things are very consistent between games. A lot of Magic players also think that milling your opponent is disruption.
It doesn't matter unless it's gone. Yeah, no, Yandu is a very controversial card because of that. That said, I mean, like, Yandu is I would argue, in as much as those decks are ever good, he goes in and out. I think he's probably at a nadir now compared to where he was, because those decks recently got some better options at the cost slot, but he is still a card that does exist. He's just not a card you ever like, oh shit, it's Yandu, I'm dead. That's not really a realistic use of the guy. Brood. On reveal, add 2 broodlings to this location with the same power. And they're him, right? They're just 2/2s. We are Brood. We are from Brood World. You are Lunch. Good flavor.
Sure, a lot of Marvel characters.
Dude, you have no idea. I have learned so much about Marvel from this freaking game, dude. I knew probably 10 characters, and now I know like 200.
That's marketing, baby. All right. So Brood. So 3 mana, energy, whatever, for 6 power. At the cost of you lose access to spaces on a location. The first thing that comes to mind is if I play Brood at a location, am I likely to win that location? And my thinking is probably not. It seems like Brood is almost the opposite of Professor X in some sense, in that if you play this, you're saying, all right, you have to like play something here. I'm like going to force you to spend some resources here at an efficient rate. That seems good. But then if your opponent spends the resources, you do probably lose that location, because there's not that much else you can do to defend yourself. I mean, this is like a token card. So there may be synergies with the idea of, okay, like, you know, there are things that like can, I don't know, are there things that like synergize with the broodlings? Like an on-reveal effect has synergies. But like you can't synergize, you know, if you duplicate this effect, you get a 4th broodling, and then you run a brooded location. It doesn't seem like it would be that exciting. So if I play this 1 card, 3 energy, my question is, okay, am I making my opponent spend more energy and more cards to deal with it? And is that like a good exchange? Like, okay, I've sacrificed this location, but I made you fight me, and I'm going to win by having like tempo from this card that I can then use to like win the other two locations. But I don't know. The rate just doesn't seem that amazing. If 1/2s aren't very good, and like 1/4 is like barely playable in some scenarios, is 3/6 really all that exciting? It doesn't seem like it would be. It feels like you can just get more for this cost. I am dubious of Brood.
Okay, so I was fist pumping early because I was like, we got him, we tricked him. But then you delved into some stuff that actually is why this card is pretty good, or has been in the past, right? This is a playable card. So Brood is a card that synergizes with those token strategies. There are cards that buff the tokens. There are cards that copy his effect, but at a higher power. There are cards that basically make it more than just a 3/6. When you think about it like that, it makes a little more sense, right? If you have a card that's buffing all the other cards on your board, that 3/6 being 3 bodies makes it better than if it was just one body.
Seems good. Like,
right.
Yeah, I think I remember Squirrel Girl or something being a card that also makes bodies.
Yeah, but she's bad.
She's bad. Okay.
That's different.
Just like it makes sense there are other cards like this, but interesting.
Yes.
This is one of the good ones.
So this is one of the good ones because of a couple of specific synergies, but what I really wanted to get at here in terms of basic stuff is there's 2 things here. One is it adds to the same power. So if you buff the original Brood, like you play a card that gives it like +2 power, and then you play it, it'll make 4.
Oh, and that's after the fact?
Not after the fact, before the fact, right? So
okay, so if something is already pumping everything, like what's
no, not like an ongoing effect, but like an effect that says, the next card you play gets a little bit stronger. If that next card is a Brood, the Broodlings also get stronger.
Okay, that makes sense. A little bit of a gruff triplets, you could say, to cite a 2023 Magic card because you got so mad at me about
I didn't know you knew any of those. Okay, all right. The other thing is that the later on you get into the game, in the way certain decks are built, is like, I'm going to play one guy here on 3, one guy here on 4, one guy here on 5, and then my 6 is going to be, I'm going to target one of those lanes. So like that is one of the things that Brood lets you do. So like with the Brood decks tended to be very straightforward. Just we would play a card that buffed a Brood, and then play the Brood, and the Brood would make 4s, and then we'd play a thing that copied the Brood, and that would make 4s. And it was just a very like dumb guy mid-range deck. That's what it is. It's just like, we're just putting stats on the board. Here's a bunch of stats. Can you beat the stats? And it would just stat check people. And that is entirely contingent on the support cards. But when Brood is correctly built around, it has been a dominant meta player before. That is a little bit out of date. I would say the last time this card was truly dominant, they've changed multiple cards that were not it in order to make it worse. But it has been, I would say, the best deck in the game before, actually.
Whew. All right, you got me again. And I mean, I can just feel my head expanding. It's pretty rare to get everything delivered with this level of efficiency. I'm just having a great time.
Thank you. Next up, SpiderMan 2099. 4/6. The first time this moves to any location, destroy an enemy card there.
And when it moves to a location, that means it's already been revealed and you have to play some kind of effect that changes its location in some way.
Yeah, that moves it to another location. Yes.
Okay. Interesting. So one thing I'm like meta aware of, just so you know, is that I feel like you haven't shown me any cards that were like one of like the top 5 cards in the game yet. And I feel like you're definitely going to try me on one of those. So there's like a part of me in the back of my head that's like watching out for like, okay, where's the really broken card going to be? Where's the one that is like the incredibly dominant meta player? And so that's like in the back of my mind. Now, SpiderMan 2099. So destroying one of your opponent's cards, and you can't choose. It's random.
Correct.
No choosing. Okay. So it's not a sacrifice effect, but it's also not a targeted destructive effect. Opponent losing a thing at random. This is not very common in Magic, so it's hard to tell. I mean, how to evaluate in Magic, let alone how to evaluate in this other game. But you also have the choice of location. I assume, it's something you can kind of put him anywhere else. So if your opponent only has one card of location, you get that one. That's nice. But then you have to play this. You have to spend turn 5 or turn 6 moving it. So it's like kind of restrictive in that way. 4-6 does not seem like very good stats given everything else we've seen, but the question is like how many stats can you take away from your opponent? How vulnerable are you going to be to this kind of thing by turn 5? Like, are they going to have locations with only one card? I think probably. It just seems like a lot. Like destroying a thing they've already played, they've already invested energy in, having some choice of like where to put it. It means you're like probably going to be like very far ahead in whatever lane he's moved to. I think like on rate, this card feels good, but I feel like it's going to depend a lot on like how good the enablers are for like moving stuff around. Where I'm just like very unclear on like, is that something you get almost for free, or is it something you have to like sacrifice a lot of power to be able to do in the first place? But I feel like I'm going to guess there are decks that have made good use of this card.
You would be incorrect. It is not something you get almost for free. It is an issue of the enablers. So I honestly kind of give you credit for that. You had the correct analysis, but you had no context within which to judge it. So you basically had to coin flip that, which as Marvel Snap players, we should all basically be familiar with coin flipping at this point. Yeah, no, that was just like your analysis was so spot on there where the issue is the enablers, not him. 4-6 is actually like a reasonable body for a good effect if you could actually make it a good effect, but the enablers for the move archetype are just not there for him. They are cards you pay an actual legitimate cost in order to play, and that is, it's unfortunate, but also I think he's a card that they have to be pretty careful with because if he ever was good, that would be very, very annoying. So I think he's one of those type of cards where your analysis was basically exactly on point, and then you just had to coin flip the context. And unfortunately, you guessed heads and it was tails. But I think you get credit for that.
All right, partial credit. That's fine. That's fine.
Galactus.
I feel like when I was playing, I actually remember there being like some kind of reveal event for this card. Like he was going to come out soon, and they're making a whole big deal of it.
Yeah. I will let you know. He has been changed multiple times since then. That reveal version of him was quite powerful. He has gone through multiple nerfs, so we're effectively asking, like, okay, they've nerfed him. Is this still actually a good
card? No, you can't nerf the face card.
No.
They should have just banned Etherworks Marvel, man. Why did Emrakul have to go? No.
Aaron just came out in favor of banning Electro. He doesn't know what that means, but we do. Okay, anyway, continue.
All right, so we have here the Emrakul of the Marvel Universe, Galactus. On reveal, if you're winning this location and this is your only card here, destroy all other locations. It's a 6/5.
Yeah.
All right, so it basically wins the game. It's like you can only play it on the last turn. You could ramp it, I guess, but that sounds really awkward to do because... Well, okay, maybe it's not awkward. Like, it lets your opponent kind of focus all their firepower on the last location, whereas you had to play this big card that isn't that powerful for its cost. So it seems like you maybe wouldn't want to ramp it out. The ideal use for this seems to be play it as the last thing of the game, win the game because you sneak onto the location that you're winning, but you have to win it with only one card. So it feels like this card has been, you're saying it's been nerfed multiple times.
Twice.
Have they nerfed it into a state of unplayability or a state of merely being very good? In order for this to work, 5 power has to be enough to win a location.
Correct.
By itself. You can't even have like put other stuff in, like, are Brooklyn's cards, like, is there way to, are there ways to like make
if you have anything there, if you have a Black Widow thing, if you have tokens, they're all cards.
Those are all cards. Okay, so it has to be on an empty location for you. 5 power has to win the location. You have to be able to get away with this at the end of the game when your opponent has like the opportunity to kind of see it coming. What would even synergize with this kind of card? Like destroying stuff, finding ways to keep a location empty? I mean, I guess with Professor X, you can't play this either if you played Professor X. So that's not going to be like some kind of insane combo. It feels hard to use. If you can somehow enable this, it's obviously absurd. That's not like me being a smart analyst. That's it. Literally says win the game. But it feels like I'm going to guess they've nerfed this into not being very good. I just like am struggling to imagine how you could like pull this off with any consistency. And it also just like, it seems like it runs the Professor X risk of like your opponent plays correctly against it. And instead of winning the game, you kind of just like lose the game because it's just a huge investment. I don't like it.
your analysis is almost exactly correct. So Galactus, when he originally released, he didn't have the clause where you had to be winning the game. And so what would happen is you would just fill your opponent's board up with crap, and then you would just play him, and then he would win you the game. It was just a garbage.
Like you didn't have to win the location, you would just fill in your opponent's.
Right, you would ramp him out on 5, and then you would play a big guy on 6, and they would die. That is how he used to be. He was like a 6-3 with that ability. And then, see, chat reminded me, he's actually been nerfed 3 times. So he was a 6-3 with the ability of, on reveal, if this is your only card here, destroy all other locations. So what you would do in that deck is you would play cards that have negative power that go over to your opponent, and then you would just absolutely crush them on that location. You'd just win one location. That's what you do. Then they nerfed him to a 6-2, which is very, very stupid, because when they nerfed him to a 6-2, one of the mechanics in Marvel Snap is related to whose cards reveal first, right? And so the way you'd win with the Galactus deck is you would play Galactus and then play a card that scales off Destroy after him. So you do that with Ramp, right? And when your card, your giant big idiot game winner with Galactus, would come down after him, the counterplay was making sure your cards reveal second and blowing up the big game winner. Now, the way you make sure your cards reveal second is whoever is winning the game, i.e. ahead in enough lanes to win the game, that's whose cards reveal first. So Galactus getting that negative power, going to 6-2, made him actually better because he would not have priority more, and your big guy would live through whatever it is that they were using to blow it up because his cards would reveal second. Then they were like, okay, this card cannot exist anymore. They made him a 6-7 and gave him his current text. Then they made a card that it has it's like a 6-3, and it says every card your opponent played here this turn dies, which obviously synergizes with its current text. So they were like, okay, we need to nerf it again. Now he's a 6-5, and he is like very, very borderline. This is a deck people play because they like it, not because it's actually like a top tier deck. Somewhere in the range of maybe a 50% win rate, maybe less. Like, it is for funsies at this point, despite the fact that the game-winning combo is so powerful. The counterplay is very stark.
Good Marvel pun.
That was unintentional.
Yeah, to be fair, if you showed it to me at a 6-7, I still would have been maybe a little dubious, but I'll take some partial credit at least for guessing that this is not a thing you can do with consistency.
There is, remember when I mentioned Electro? It was like you came out in favor of nerfing Electro. Electro is like the premier ramp option in the deck. He's like the guy that allows this deck to even really exist. But because Marvel Snap is Marvel Snap, there really aren't other ramp options, so you can't really do anything about it. If you want ramp to exist, you have to allow this to exist as well. Galactus, very polarizing, has been extremely powerful, has been too good to be fun before. And I think that's like the number one issue that he has, is that he's just a card that says like, well, if you didn't counterplay me, you're dead. And people really don't like that. Maximus, 3-7, but he's drawing your opponent's cards.
That is, Goblin Guy? I don't know. Not a lot of good equivalents for this one in Magic. So first thing that comes to mind is, can you play this as one of the last cards in the last turn of the game, such that your opponent's cards don't get to be played? And can you arrange the game such that like a 3-7 is good? 3-7 seems decent, except for that Brood was kind of like a 3-6 and Dumb Guy mid-range. Yep.
I'll give you context here. This is the card that is tied for the most power among 3-cost cards.
Okay, so tied for the most power among 3-cost cards, has this negative effect, but like if I replaced your opponent draws 2 cards with, you have to play this on the last turn of the game. So this thing about like how important is sequencing in Snap? Like you mentioned Dumb Guy mid-range before. Decks are just like trying to put power on the board quickly and don't have some kind of crazy synergistic combo. This seems like it could be a reasonable card for those decks, but part of me is also wondering how broken are 6-drops. Like if you play this as the last card, that means you don't get to play a 4 or 5 or 6 on that turn. You're playing like 2 3s or something. Are there decks that are just like a bunch of 1s, 2s, and 3s that are just like efficiently doing stuff? In that context, this card seems like it would be good. But then you do have to give up that ability to play something like a Galactus. Like if Galactus was amazing at first, that tells me 6-drops are at least playable. And probably, I imagine that they would try to design this game so that 6-drops were exciting and the last turn was doing something really powerful. But I'm still waiting for whatever the most broken card is to come out, if there is one. And there's like some
Why
potential
are you
here.
sure
There's
I put a
potential.
broken card on here, man?
I don't know, man. I'm gonna say that Maximus, at least, it's not one of those cards you could like play in every deck, but I feel like there are decks where Maximus is good, maybe even very good. I'm gonna guess somewhere between good and very good for his context. I don't know how popular or good the kinds of decks that would play him are, but he seems like an effect that like you can probably set things up so the downside is not huge. Although, man, that he's in your hand and you can't play him, and you could have a card in your hand that you could play instead. That would make things so much more flexible. I'm already starting to downgrade in my mind. I'm going to say like playable in context, but not broken.
Correct. Nailed it.
Okay.
Absolutely crushed. Knocked it out of the park. Absolutely. Yes. So like this is a guy that is exactly playable in context, but not broken. And even in those contexts, I don't think he's I think he's maybe been in one of the best decks before. I would say that he has probably been in one of the best decks before in a very different format context. Almost a year ago at this time is when this guy was last like sincerely, legitimately playable. Chat's gonna be like, what do you mean one of the best decks? This guy was played in Leech Leader. This guy was played in various Surfer decks. So those are the decks that I'm talking about here. But like this was a card that was highly played about a year ago. Since then, a lot of the key pieces to the decks that would allow you to either recover from being a 3/7 or buff him upwards to get even more value out of him and just a big guy have been a little bit downgraded. Plus, they've released several other like sort of scaling guys that scale a little bit higher than he does at his cost. So generally speaking, you are correct about when you want to play him. You want to play him either last or in some form where you completely nullify the downside. Other than that, I basically think you nailed it entirely. I think you completely nailed it. That is exactly how I would describe Maximus right now.
Mm-hmm. So he's like a leveler or a sky swallower type thing. Like you can negate the effect, but it's still not like in Magic. That's still not very good because it takes a lot of effort to negate effects. It's not something you get for free.
You do kind of get it for free in Snap, like or not necessarily for free, but like there are some cards that will do it. But playing it on turn 6 is how you negate the effect. Like that's how you make him. That's how you do it. So like he has like that inbuilt thing. He's a reasonable card. It's just he's very rarely going to be seen as something truly top tier. Next up is Crossbones.
All right, another 4/8 doesn't make you discard 2 cards at random. It's good.
Does not, and 4/8 is like good stats for 4. Like the baseline vanilla 4 is a 4/6. So 4/8 is like those are good numbers on this card. You can only play it though at locations where you're winning.
Okay, so here we go. It's turn 3. I have this Crossbones in my hand. I'm winning. I have to be winning a location, which means I have to have been playing a deck that like does some stuff in the early game. It isn't trying to set up for some kind of like crazy late game combo where everything explodes. I need to have already invested cards in a location to be winning there, possibly more or better cards than my opponent in order to be winning. Like maybe I had to spend my 2 where they spent their 1, or I had to spend my 3 where they spent their 2. Or I have to have spent a card where they spent none. Then I have to play this thing at the same location, investing even more into a place I was already winning.
Yes.
Like get there. Which is like, I guess it's kind of similar to Professor X, because in order to like have Professor X win a location, you kind of have to have also invested some other stuff there besides him, probably.
Correct.
Except for that Crossbones, unlike Professor X, like allows for interaction. Like your opponent, if they really need to beat you there, they can try. Or they can ignore him and say, all right, I'm going to fight for the other 2 locations. Sure. Now, more efficient than Professor, but like much easier to counter if your opponent wanted to. Oh, man. How? So if we're thinking like it's good in aggro decks where you're like trying to get a lot of power up early. So part of my thing is just like how easily can your opponent outscale this late if they actually want to? Is it a good tempo play?
You're on the clock.
Oh, I'm on the clock. Oh no. It just feels like I'm gonna guess this card. I'm gonna give a relative. I'm gonna guess this card is worse than Professor X.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Way worse. So
Okay.
Crossbones is generally regarded as one of the worst cards in the game. That said,
Mhm.
he has seen play in some shells that are built around. So you know how we showed you the move card previously? There's two types of move in Marvel Snap, basically. One is cards that are payoffs, and the other is cards that move themselves. And so Crossbones in cards that move themselves actually makes a little bit of sense because you can invest in a location without being fully committed to it, and the payoff is you get a really good body, right? So you invest in a location, but your cards can leave. They don't have to stay there. Crossbones can stay there, but you're not overcommitting. That is the only time he's ever seen play. For the most part, he is regarded as like complete booty cheeks, but that is like he has seen play. Also, I'll let you know, I don't think it's going to come up, so I feel fine telling you this. 4-8 is a good break point because Shang-Chi for the most of Marvel Snap is the card that blows up big cards. He blew up things that were 9 or bigger. So 8 is a very solid stat line. They actually just recently changed him to be 10 because he's a little bit too dominant, but like just having a card that matched up well into that and was unable to get got by it was sort of how this guy worked in the one time that he's ever been good.
Interesting. But yeah, I had a feeling that the juice was not going to quite be worth the squeeze.
A card you may recognize, actually, if you played early enough. This is Devil Dinosaur. +2 power for each card in your hand.
If I played early enough, what is that? What did they do to Devil Dinosaur?
No, you played like 30 games, right? You probably saw this card.
Okay, like it appears in the starter decks. Yeah, I have seen this card before. It rings a bell. +2 power for each card in your hand. All right, so 12 card decks. Game is 6 turns. You end up drawing 9 of your 12 cards.
Correct.
The base case is you play 6 of those cards.
Or
no, I guess no more than that. I mean, probably more than that. I feel like at least in my starter decks, I had lots of games where I play all the cards I drew because you have 21 energy to spend, and usually your average card cost was lower than 3.5 at that point, so you'd be playing more than 6. So then we have like a 5, 7, 5, 9. And we already talked about Shang-Chi making big stuff harder to play. We talked about 4-6 or 4-7 being like a reasonable size. So then there's some question of like, how do you break this? How do you have like there be lots of cards in your hand? Are there effects that let you like add like fake cards to your own hand the way that Black Widow does for your opponent?
Yep.
Okay. Those cards seem like they could be pretty good with Devil Dinosaur. Because it's like feels like maybe pretty easy for him to get. If he gets to like a 5-11 or a 5-13, that sounds strong. But it's just like for 5, what else can you be doing? Is like size. It sounds like this is a game where size does matter. We've hit that theme a few times. Where like big stuff have keyword big, as they say in Magic. Actually,
I use keyword big, and people never know what I'm talking about because they don't know what keywords are. It sucks. Like it, but yes, yes.
You kids gotta learn your history. But then, like, how easy is it to add cards to your own hand? Feels like they couldn't make those cards very strong just because Marvel Snap again is like a pretty small game. I don't think Devil Dinosaur is very good.
Okay, so this is actually just like a really interesting one because Devil Dinosaur is the best early collection card in the entire game. He is just the biggest 5 that exists entirely. He's enormous, and size does matter. However, as you scale up in collection level, like in Pool 2, I think he's undeniably the best possible thing you can be doing. As you scale up in collection level, though, the counters to him become more pronounced. There are more things that can deal with a big guy or can go over the top of a big guy or can Shang-Chi a big guy, such that investing in the big guy becomes a little bit more risky if when the big guy dies, you lose the game because there's a lot of stuff that can kill a big guy, especially a big guy whose ability is ongoing. There's a lot of tech cards that are like, I get rid of ongoing abilities, I steal ongoing abilities, I kill big guys, a bunch of that, right? So Dinosaur is really good until those cards start showing up everywhere. And even in like true endgame, you can still play this guy it's just usually not going to be the best thing you can be doing.
Mm-hmm. That's like all the guesses I make here in context of like full game, you have access to everything, and I'm thinking like, how good is this card for you as opposed to...
No, I mean, I'm contextualizing it up, right? Like, but like the starter deck thing, it is tough because Devil Dinosaur for a very long time was actually amazing even at endgame. Extremely good even at endgame, but threats have become like you're able to do more with cheaper cards now, basically, that are a little bit less vulnerable. And that is like sort of the main
Shivan Dragon type thing. Like, this was really cool to open your first booster pack, but can't play it so easily now.
I would say more like pick a card from like 2011. Pick a card from the pre-Thragtusk.
I was going to say like Thragtusk, man. It's a 5/3.
It's pre-Thragtusk. It's like before the Titans.
Before cards had to do stuff when they had the battlefield.
Before they were good. Yeah. Before that happened, this was the guy, right?
Shoot.
And now like the numbers are a little bit bigger on some smaller guys, unfortunately. He is, that said, an absolutely key card in the Thanos archetype, which is an archetype that just plays a bunch of small stuff and draws a bunch of cards, so it just always has a full hand. He's just like a huge, big idiot. And in that deck, you're fine having a huge, big idiot because you usually play multiple 5s per game, and it's not going to lose you the game. But outside of that archetype, if you're playing a pure Devil Dinosaur deck, you're probably not doing very well.
I enjoy that Thanos always has like a full hand. That's very flavorful.
The stones used to mostly draw you cards. Now only 4 out of the 6 draw you cards. They took the draw off of one of them. But yeah, the stones are very cool. They're like the Thanos, I didn't have you evaluate it because I sent you the video for the previous one, and I wanted to make sure I didn't overlap in any cards because Thanos was in there. I didn't want to like let you get a chance to like
I did not have the video because I didn't want to learn anything in advance.
Okay. All right. But yeah, the Thanos was one I didn't have you evaluate, but I've got an equivalent one on here for you in terms of complexity. And Thanos is kind of the only deck that's really going to succeed with this. And Thanos is at like a bit of a nadir right now for various reasons. So Dino's probably about as bad as he's been in the course of the entirety of Marvel Snap, actually. Reverse Dino. It's Ronan the Accuser. He's Dino, but in reverse. Got power for your opponent's hand.
We've already seen that you can add cards to your opponent's hand. Via Black Widow and via drawing your opponent cards. So this is an interesting combo, obviously, with Maximus. We already know that Maximus isn't great. It's interesting that when we talked about Maximus, you didn't mention this card as like the kind of thing like, hey, there are cards that are good that combo with your opponent having more cards.
Yeah, I didn't mention that because I knew he was on the list.
You did know he was on the list, so okay. That sounds like a good combo. That sounds like now my Maximus, instead of being a 3/7, it's a 3/11 if I have a Ronan in. Now, of course, Ronan is smaller than he should be. But I also wonders how Shang-Chi works. Is it the kind of card where it's like good to be small and then get big at the end of the game before Shang-Chi can get you?
Actually, yes. That is how it would work, yes.
Okay. So there's a question of like, all right, can I trust my opponent to have cards in their hand? That's a harder thing, though. It's like any card in Magic that depends on your opponent having a certain kind of thing going on is, given that you have no sideboards, you have to trust that they're not emptying their hand reliably and like playing out all their stuff, because then this gets really bad.
Correct.
Now, can I trust that? It sounds like, guessing you want to use all your resources. You want to try and use all your cards if you can and not be stuck with cards in hand at the end of the game, because it's like something you didn't get to do. It seems like it would be hard for Ronan to be better than Devil Dinosaur. I'm going to guess that it's kind of mediocre.
Nailed it. Yep, kind of mediocre. People love playing this guy because he's just fun to make work. But the effort is not worth the expense, and it is easier to make Dino big than it is to trust that your opponent is going to have a lot of cards in hand, because yes, you do want to use all of your resources when you play cards.
Okay. I'm on a roll, which means you're about to hit me with something real complicated. I can feel it.
Yeah, I've got 3 more left, and they are all ridiculous. All right?
Oh, here we go.
This is Phoenix Force.
Okay, Reanimator.
Yes, it's the Reanimator card.
You forgot this card existed?
I did. Which is not like I forgot it existed, but I forgot that it counted as Reanimator. Because I just don't even really think of it like that.
Sure. All right, and merging just means it gets the combined like power and effects?
Correct. You get the effect of the card that died.
And that card can move each turn for free. That sounds good. Like moving, we already established that moving is generally not something you get at a low cost, but it actually is at expense. I mean, I guess Phoenix Force is a 4/5 is like a little small, but it seems like if you can reliably have something kind of reasonable that's destroyed, this seems like it'd be really good. You get like a 4, much more than 5, depending on what you revive, and then you can move that thing around. It's an on-reveal effect, so I guess it can be interfered with in certain ways. What happens if, like, you bounce this back to your hand? Does it come back as the merged card?
Yeah, but you'd have to play 4.
You'd have to play it again. Sure.
Yeah.
Like, it's not Black Widow, right? It's not cheap. It's not the kind of thing you can bounce a bunch. So just like thinking out loud in terms of like how merging even works. Because
yeah, it is the new card, and it has like a stapled on ability to move. So it is whatever card gets revived.
Okay. This strikes me as it's going to depend on like how good the enablers for Destroy are, but for like most of the things you reanimate with this seems like it could be really powerful. It seems like you're getting like a 4. Even if you can only destroy something kind of small reliably, you're getting like a 4/8, a 4/9, and it moves around for free. I think Phoenix Force seems quite good.
Okay, so I think that first of all, you are correct. Phoenix Force is a good card. But I think the reasoning deserves some examination here, because this is actually really interesting. I know there's probably no way you could get this right, why this card is exactly good. Phoenix Force is key to the probably, I would say, over the past 3 months or so, the best combo deck in Marvel Snap.
And I didn't even get into the idea of like if you can choose exactly what to destroy and then bring back something very expensive.
So this is why I want to talk about the reasoning. Like destroying stuff is not easy. Destroying stuff is not easy to do. So the way Phoenix Force tends to work, I will just go over here, right? The idea that you like the Phoenix Force combo, the nut draw, right, is you destroy this guy, Multiple Man, and he says when this moves, add a copy to the old location. So you play Multiple Man on turn 2, and then on turn 3 you play like anything that blows it up, which is like a Venom, for example. It'll eat the Multiple Man will die. On turn 4 you play the Phoenix Force. That's the Phoenix Force combo. That's the thing that it does. So what I think that like you ended up with the correct answer, but I will say I think you think destroy is a lot easier to accomplish, because again, you need a specific card on 2, a specific card on 3, a specific card on 4 in order to make this work, right?
I think it's like anything you destroy. I guess I was imagining a card that was like a reverse Yandu, like you destroy the top card. There is not a reverse Yandu. There is not a reverse Yandu. That would be too good, it sounds like.
Yeah. No, like that is kind of what I figured. I figured you were imagining that it was easy because Yandu destroying your opponent's stuff.
Or a card that like discards one of the cards in your hand. Are discard good cards destroyed?
No, they're not the same thing.
Oh, all right. There's a big difference. Okay. I was imagining any kind of like, Hell Cow into Phoenix or something being a thing you could set up.
No. So like it is a little bit harder to make work than you think, but like, and that's sort of why it falls into this combo piece type thing where it's like, okay, you get your Multiple Man, right? He's now an 8-power Multiple Man. He moves around the board, leaving 8-power Multiple Men everywhere. And you just have like a board of like a ton of power. And so like in a game where size matters, this is a combo that aims at a lot of size. The Living Tribunal. Yeah, so when you told me that you played a little bit of Marvel Snap before, BBD has never played it. So I was like, all right, I got to give him some harder cards. The Living Tribunal is one that I was like, I felt like I couldn't give that to BBD, but I feel like I can give it to you because you played 30 games of it. You understand like location dynamics a little bit.
Okay. Oh boy. So I'm just gonna like assume in the base case this like works, that you can play this. Your opponent is like not super likely to be able to negate all your ongoing effects, and even if like a 6/9 is not good, but at least it's not Galactus. Like you're getting something for your mana. If they somehow can counter the effect. So that's like not taking like a huge risk to play this aside from like if there are much better 6s you could be playing, which you probably could be. Like let's think about this effect. So you play this, you want to have just like a lot of raw power on the board. Maybe there are strategies that are like very good at putting a lot of power at one location in a way that costs them in other locations, and then splitting things up is like helpful. I could also imagine there being like locations that add power to cards that are sitting at them, where it's like very, you just have like a higher powered game for everybody, and then splitting things up is really good because the other locations are more power starved, for example. Feels like this could have a lot of applications, but also like it's a card that's better when you have more power. That's like the whole game. Marvel Snap is just putting power on the board. That can't be that easy. It can't be that you're just like going to easily have more power than your opponent and you get an advantage of spreading it around. They're trying to do the same thing. So locations. So I'm just like imagining a typical board. You're like winning one location by a little bit. You're losing. So if you're winning one location, losing the other two, this probably just changes it into like you're losing all three, unless you're really winning that one location, which I guess some of your opponent might let you get away with. This. But like this is mostly feels like it would be good if you're already winning two locations, and in that case you're just winning the game. I don't think this card is very good.
I kind of think you nailed it, right? So you described all the situations in which it is good. This card is played exclusively in combo decks that aim to win one location by unreasonable numbers and then split that difference up. That is what the Living Tribunal does. The typical Living Tribunal combination is like Iron Man is a card that doubles your power at a given location. You like get an Iron Man and then a card that doubles the Iron Man, and then you play the Living Tribunal there, and then you split like 40 or 50 power up amongst your lanes. That is typically where this guy is seen. He's also seen in a discard Hela deck. Hela is a card that brings back the cards you discarded. So the way this works is you just put a bunch of big guys in your deck, discard your entire hand, play Hela. It's very much a casino deck because you run the risk of discarding her, and then you just split up a bunch of power.
Isn't that also Reanimator?
No, see, it's not Reanimator. It's discard. That's different. That's not Reanimator. You asked about the graveyard.
Okay,
you asked about the graveyard. There is no graveyard. Right, that is, sure. You can't. I was specific.
Fun of you, but you've got me right there. You're
I was
right.
specific. The Living Tribunal is the kind of card that is these extremely linear, can you beat me strategy. It's like, honestly, I would say it's like the mono red of Marvel Snap, which is to say, like, it's just like, look, if you interact with me in the slightest, you're probably going to beat my ass. If you know what I'm doing, you're going to be a little more advantaged against me. But if you don't know what I'm doing, I'm going to kill you. And that's it. And that's what the Living Tribunal manages to do.
But unfortunately, good players probably know what you're doing.
Correct. He's not like overwhelmingly good. He is at best the kind of card. One of the things I think that's very good about his design is that because he is so telegraphed, as soon as he becomes popular, it becomes a lot easier to beat him. And that ends up costing them cubes. And I think that is like a very real thing. People in my chat are saying, I don't think finicky combo deck is mono red. And it's like, kind of not mono red. But like true aggro isn't really a thing in Marvel Snap. And I feel like the core conceit of mono red is saying like, do you have it? And that's what Living Tribunal is about. That's the card.
Yeah, I feel it's almost more like, there are many other finicky combo decks in Magic you could compare it to. Just like, here's a big thing. Can you stop me from having the big thing?
Yeah,
and
like it's the Spanish Inquisition. Sure, if you want to do it that.
Oh yeah, that's
yeah.
I like that. Yeah. I like that comparison more. Okay. It is funny. Like mono red is almost like the opposite, and mono red's the deck you play in arena to win cubes quickly.
Yeah, one of the things about Snap that's always interesting to me is there is no mono red. Like mono red's just not a thing. It doesn't exist, and they're like aggro as an archetype is not really a thing. It's like a whole thing. It's a very interesting game in that context.
Mm-hmm. It makes sense when you always draw lands. There's fewer chances for something like mono red to strike.
Correct.
Or punish.
This is high evolutionary. Don't worry, we're going to go through it all. At the start of your game, unlock the potential of your cards with no abilities. We talked about the vanilla cards before. You probably saw some of them in the first few games you played. High evolutionary, you put him in your deck. He's a 4/4, bad numbers. He gives them abilities. So we're going to go through what they are. Wasp afflicts a random enemy card with -1 power, but she is free. I know we talked about Yellow Jacket earlier. This is like Yellow Jacket with no downside. Misty Knight, when you end a turn with unspent energy, give another friendly card +1 power. So we talked about scaling 1/2s earlier, scaling 1-drops. This is definitely one of them. But you do pay the cost. Shocker, give the leftmost card in your hand -1 cost. Remember, don't mock the Shocker. Cyclops is sort of the bridge between the two strategies that this guy does. When you end a turn with unspent energy, afflict 2 random enemies here with 1 power. The Thing now afflicts 3 random enemy cards here with 1 power. Abomination costs 1 less for each enemy card in play that's afflicted with negative power. And the Hulk says when you end a turn with unspent energy +2 power.
And it counts from your hand because otherwise it would never activate.
Only if he's in your hand. Yeah, only if he's in your hand though.
Yeah.
So like you have to have
or in play, but like it'd be hard to get it in play and also have
yeah.
unspent energy. Okay,
Correct.
so it like creates its own little combo deck. Because my first thought, as you were showing me the first couple cards, is like, okay, you play this bad card, and now you get to play a lot of cards that are like pretty good, but do they have any synergy? And it turns out they do have synergy. Okay, Abomination was the one that stood out from that list, where like difference between like a 1-2 or a 1-3 or like a 3-5 and a 3-7, that doesn't seem so stark relative to like a 5-9 versus a 1-9. That's a big difference. So I feel like if this deck is good, I also wonder, like, okay, so you're playing these, is that like 7 total cards, High Evolutionary in those cards?
Yeah, you don't have to play all of them.
You don't have to play all of them, but you can play some of them. So like you don't have to play the ones that seem less impressive. I feel like this card, and are there many other cards in the game that like also do the afflict with negative power thing?
There are, I believe, 2 or 3.
Okay. So I feel like the power, just my immediate instinct, it's been a long video, I'll try to go fast. My immediate instinct is this is the card, the deck this goes in feels like it like rises and falls in the power of like Abomination. And I guess, so you're doing 2 things. You're trying to afflict your opponent's stuff. You're trying to have energy unspent at the end of turn. Having energy unspent at the end of turn feels like a pretty big sacrifice. Like, I guess if you have like Misty Knight and the Hulk that you plan to play and something else, maybe you're getting like 3 or 4 power back for that 1 unspent energy, which is like a decent ratio in Snap. But like, you're making your turns kind of clunky. You're like playing off curve almost deliberately, which feels like, I don't know, you're just losing a lot. Gosh, Abomination just seems so broken though. It just feels so weird that they would just like print a good deck kind of into existence with this one card. Although it's a brilliant way to make use of the vanilla cards that otherwise have no use. I don't know, but then you have to like have your opponent has to have cards for you to afflict. You have to be like playing into locations where they already have stuff in order to like get that effect. I don't think High Evolutionary is great. This would be like the broken one if you were going to hit me with one, but I'm going to go ahead and take a stand. Well, I will say High Revolutionary feels like it's great if Abomination is great. I don't think it's great if Abomination is not great. I'm going to make it a conditional answer.
That is so fascinating because that's exactly what I thought when this guy came out. I was like, Abomination seems so absolutely broken. That's unbelievable. It turns out Abomination is like the worst of these cards. I was shocked too. But like Abomination, like the setup that it takes. So the way High Evolutionary decks have functioned in the past is in concert with lockdown strategies. That was when they were at their peak. You would play Wasp, you would play Misty Knight, you'd play Cyclops, and you'd play the Hulk, right? And what you would do is you'd like play a card that says, all right, for the rest of the game, you have 1 turn to play in this, and then it closes off. You drop a Cyclops there, and he basically solos that lane because you repeatedly skip. Cyclops is giving everything they play their negative power. The Hulk ends up being, you know, monstrously large, and you just win the game because the Hulk is galactic huge. I would say the best one of these is probably still, I would say, it's going to be the Hulk, it's going to be Cyclops, or it's going to be Misty Knight. Those are the ones that are actually good. The Hulk is, I think, an interesting use case because I didn't think he was going to be very good. I didn't think Hulk was like an amazing card when he first came out. I had to be convinced that it was good. I wanted to do the A-bomb stuff. But Hulk is just like a 6/18. A card that you can just put on the board and be like, I'm winning this lane. And while I will say High Evolutionary has had its ups and downs in the meta, it's been the best deck before. I think right now it's probably like tier 2-ish. This is the card that I was, this is like the one where it's like, this is like a really good card. This guy is really good. He is an archetype unto himself. He's not always the best archetype, but he has consistently been like, I would say, tier 2, tier 3 or above. Like he's been good. He's been around it. And there's usually something to do with him. And usually that keys off of Cyclops and Hulk.
Interesting. All right. Yeah, I think I'm just like, as a Magic player instinct, I'm just like so used to ignoring things like the Hulk. It's like, it's huge. That's all it is. It's huge. But I mean, if it's just like Professor X, you just play it, you win, except you win even if your opponent had cards there. That's good.
Yeah. Like big number matters. Like think about like this number, a guy this size just like totally invalidates like, oh, you played a 3-4. Oh, you played a 4-8. None of that matters. He's enormous. Like that is sort of the pitch of this card, right? And like this is a card that I would argue has been completely meta defining to the point that I made too many videos on it and started getting less views on those videos. Like that is how good this card has been before. I wouldn't say it's there now.
The broken one when I least expected it, or I guess when I should have most expected it.
Perhaps,
but cool. I mean, that's a really neat card.
All right, that's
good design space.
That's gonna be it. Thank you so much. Would you like to remind anybody where to find you, anything like that?
Yeah, so as a reminder, I am a intermittent Magic the Gathering streamer. You can find me at twitch.tv/Aaron Gertler. If the mod could throw that in the chat as a link. If you like Magic, you might like my content. You got a good sense of who I am here. I'm a very analytical guy. I talk through decisions in great detail. My whole thing when playing is like, I'm going to tell you everything that's going through my head, and hopefully you can take whatever bits of that you want and put them in your head too. And a new Magic set just dropped, so hopefully I'll be streaming some of that pretty soon. Go ahead and drop a follow if you like Magic. That's it for me. Thanks so much. This was a really interesting experience, and I can't wait to see the video.